we're here really today because I really wanted to hear more about, Amanda, your written piece, and Devon, your graphic recording, but mostly I wanted to hear about, your both of the collaboration
Mhm.
that had, um, that you both went through to create the graphic recording. Um, so the graphic recording, I think, it came out late last December, right? I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes, last year.
What
Um,
day is it? What year is it?
COVID time.
It
So
feels
weird.
like a long time ago in some ways, doesn't it?
Hmm.
It does, yeah.
Feels
Yeah.
like forever ago, but also like 2 weeks.
Like, yes,
Like weird,
everything feels like
weird
that. It's like
COVID
two
time.
weeks or like last year. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So yeah, the graphic recording, I guess, is a graphic translation of Amanda, your autoethnography between boxes. And this was a piece that you made for CRIX, the Cultural Research Center, Center for Research in Cultural Studies, yes. So CRIX, and their COVID-19 series. So I sort of wanted to begin with you, Amanda. Can you sort of tell us a little bit about how this work came about and your inspiration from it? Beginning with your original written audio piece.
Sure, Mika. So I think this work was born out of a mix of boredom, uncertainty about the future, and the need to let my feelings out. And it was also inspired by a book that I had recently read at the time for my MA program at UOW. And the book is called A Different Kind of Ethnography by Danielle Elliott and Dara Culhane. And at first I remember I had this sense of, wow, everyone is going through the same global event that is unprecedentedly affecting all of us. But soon I realized that it was not affecting all of us equally and proportionally. And it was like we were putting a spotlight onto all of those societal inequalities that were always there. And I was personally going through very tough times when COVID hit. And I just kind of started writing down some short flow of consciousness texts as a relief mechanism, I guess, and also as a form of immersion in myself and an opportunity to investigate, self-observe, to document, self-reflect about my personal experience and my journey through this new pandemic world that we were living in. And the central idea of the text, the boxes that I talk about, were inspired by the boxes we check whenever we are filling out forms. So you have to state your gender, your ethnicity, your immigration status, and so on. And depending on which and how many of those boxes you check and how they intersect with each other, the more or less likely you will be affected by COVID. So I called it between boxes because being a Brazilian woman of color and ethnically ambiguous, I've always struggled with finding the boxes that are meant for me, because I feel I am all and none of those boxes at the same time. And in that sense, it made me reflect how the absence of some boxes or how intersectional boxes may imply a lack of understanding of how COVID might be affecting different people in different ways that we don't even realize. So for me to be between the boxes is basically to resist the idea of being assigned labels, boxes, or categories, and to exist in a much broader space where all of our intersections and within our positionality can coexist can be combined, and so we can have a sense of identity that is more complex and holistic.
That's such a, I loved, I think what you brought up about um, how existing as a certain identities during COVID, and that idea of the ticking boxes is I like, no wonder I think that translated so well into the graphic recording, because that's such a, I think that's such a beautiful way to put it, or maybe not beautiful, what is that? Just a really good way to put it. Like, I can picture what you're trying to tell me in my mind. Um, so I guess to transition from that, I guess what did it mean for you to embark on this graphic recording project with Devon, and can the both of you sort of walk me through what that process sort of looked like?
Yeah, it was it came really fast and kind of furious, eh? Like we had a few conversations back and forth in email, and I was so excited to start working with the motif of the box and also the body, because spatially it was like fascinating to me that on a page, which is already a kind of a box, it's got borders, there's things that are on the page, there are things not on the page. Within that, it was like the labels that Amanda talks about in the early part of her piece, I was like, those are boxes too. And like all these overlapping and receding spaces can be defined by lines and just black and white space. So it was fun to figure out how to draw enough, but not draw too much that it would kind of hold up what Amanda was saying, and allow your mind to kind of wander and like consider spaces and how they're defined, right? And especially with the box and the body repeating and receding as she's talking, and it goes to different parts of the page. It happened really fast. It came together really fast. We talked about brushes and textures and patterns, remember, in the early conversations, and I kept coming back to that image of Amanda with her tattoo. It's a black and white photo, and she's got that beautiful tattoo on her arm, and I just kept thinking about like refractions and lines and then charcoal and like kind of making it visible, the work that she was trying to describe without overstepping, because it was that dance that I was trying to play, not just do a straight ahead graphic recording, but more kind of exploit the motion of sketching out and drawing out ideas, like to support what she was saying. It was really fun to go back and forth. I remember looking at the emails again and just being like, we were on fire. Those first few, we were like really like, uncovering it as we were trying to explain in visuals what we were thinking about.
Yeah, it was so much fun, and it was so smooth. And I think Devon did an amazing job. And that just the opportunity to collaborate with you on this project. I mean, it's not always that we get to have something we wrote being transformed into a beautiful graphic recording by such a talented artist. So it was a brand new process to me. And yeah, I was just surprised how fast and furious, as you mentioned, Devon, we were. And I'm not sure, because I am a designer, so I am a very visual person. But I feel like we had a lot of synergy with our aesthetics and our creative visions for the video. So everything you were envisioning, I was kind of like, I had this in the back of my mind. So it was kind of crazy in that way, because we were really like complementing each other with our ideas. And I felt that you capture nuances that the written word and the audio were not conveying because you were also adding your visual interpretation of my
Mm.
text, which was very rich for me, just witnessing whatever you were, you know, like transforming the text into something else, but that it was just adding more layers of depth and, you know, different lenses. So it was a really neat process.
The graphic recording actually came out so great. I actually got to see, because I remember earlier, Devon, you made a Dropbox.
Mhm.
And Amanda, I could see some of the references that you gave Devon in the beginning, and then afterwards, when the graphic recording finally finished, I was actually comparing some of the references that Amanda
Mhm.
gave to you and the final graphic recording, and it actually turned out so well.
Mm.
And the references that you gave Devon and Amanda were really translated well into the piece. This is something that I actually wanted to ask the both of you. Like, so the style, I guess, of the graphic recording is very sketchy,
Mhm.
black and white. I could definitely see the refractions sort of
Mhm.
idea that was going on there. Can you both sort of talk about these artistic decisions and yeah, like what made you think of these certain images, Amanda? And I guess because you also have experience as a designer, you said, what was going through your head?
Okay, so
Mm.
it was crazy because when I was writing the text, I always have like a lot of visuals going on in my mind as well, and I had a photography along with the piece, so it already had like some visual reference in that way. But I remember talking to Devon, and then she was the one coming up with the idea of going with a more sketchy, rough, sharp kind of like look. And I thought that was perfect. I wouldn't do any other way because there is some rawness to the
Mm.
text that I thought you would translate really well with those aesthetic choices. So I felt we were super in sync. So she came up with those aesthetic choices. And I was like, yes, this is actually brilliant. This is perfect. So the references, the other visual references that I put in the Dropbox folder were informed by Devon's ideas. And then we were just, it just
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah, it was kind of like going back and forth really nicely because I was using your imagery and your photograph and your body and your tattoo, and then like kind of firing it back at you, and you're like, yeah, and then this, and then you gave the references, and it did. I remember looking at some, because I felt like it could go either way. I remember early days, I had this vision of it being really kind of like emerging, rough charcoal, that kind of planning look. Or remember I was saying it could be really geometric and really like really mechanical lines and really like no grayscale, like just super. And I think that would have done such a different thing to your work. And maybe the one that we went with is better because it was more, it was kind of looser for the viewer. You know what I mean? Like your words are so beautiful and they're sharp in a way, like they're so succinct that when you're looking at a visual that complements it, but it's not matching perfectly, I think. But yeah, it's so interesting. I think about that a lot, like how much the visuals could actually change the interpretation, right? And so the fact that we were in sync helped. And the fact that you're visual, right? Like you were able to flesh out those visuals and speak that same language with me. from the very beginning, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, if we had gone to the more geometric creative concept, I keep imagining how it would turn out, and I think it would be really cool. Like I can see it in my head, and I almost feel that if we have gone that way, it would be mostly like an outsider, kind of like having an interpretation of the text, where
Totally.
the way we did it, it's mostly, like you said, complementing the text. So from like my personal standpoint, but maybe if we had done very geometric and just lines and boxes and very, you know, kind of organized, it would be almost like a commentary on.
And you know what? That just occurred to me is when you were talking about the checking off boxes on the form, that imagery was never in my mind. And when you said that, it totally like blew my mind a little bit today, because I think had we gone more geometric, it would have been almost like that lens of a form. Like it would have been too, and because we were in the sort of like more like a gray space, like we were in between and we were on the intersectional plane. We weren't making it really, really specific and easy and literal. So I think I didn't even have that feeling until this today when I realized that you had this whole other symbolic element to the boxes. But oh my gosh, thank goodness.
Yeah, I didn't want to influence you because the text is so metaphorical. It like I did it in that way because I want everyone to have a different interpretation.
Yes,
you know, like,
and that's what's beautiful about it.
Yeah, so I just don't like giving it out. So I didn't want to influence your vision. Yeah.
I'm glad, because I think we got there.
I think that's why the recording works so well, because Amanda, you didn't want, sorry, like not literally, well, you don't want people to put you in a box, right? And so I guess if you told Devon about, you know, that ticking boxes of identity, and if Devon actually drew that, then that is something you wouldn't have wanted in the first place. You wanted that.
It's too.
Form.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so true. And
yeah,
sometimes in more formal graphic recording, that's what I'm trying to do, right? Like if Amanda was talking about, you know, filling forms and ticking boxes, I would have straight up drawn that in a room. Like if, let's say you were presenting it, I would have gone for the literal, like, what's the easiest way I can get this message? What, you know, kind of simplistic drawing can I do that hits it home as fast as I can? But I on purpose did the opposite for this piece. And I'm also going to do the opposite for you, Mika, because I want to strike that same like in between space of interpretation. Because I think, well, first of all, with this body of work that you guys are researching and talking about, it lends itself perfectly to a more artistic, more open visual, you know? It's almost like it goes into, I don't want to say like bad territory, but like it would do something that I would kind of go against your work if I was trying.
Yeah, it could just reinforce whatever we're trying to say rather than resisting and, you know, like trying to fight back those ideas. And I guess, yeah, doing in a more abstract and non-obvious visual form, you can really, you know, like fight back and allow people to have a new interpretation. So in my case, I want to resist those boxes. I don't want to be in those boxes because I didn't choose them, you know? So, and also like, I don't like the idea of being in a box. It seems really boring. So I feel like by not doing the literal translation, you know, we are actually fighting it back and resisting the idea and saying, hey, identities are way more complex and way more holistic, and they are not as simple as, you know, just being reduced to boxes being checked in form.
And then the other thing is too, like, I did put you in several boxes in the drawing because I was thinking about COVID and isolation and your physical white box of your, I'm assuming it was your apartment. I never asked you.
Yeah.
With windows. Yeah. And so that juxtaposition is really interesting because, like, I think that's what you're driving at with your piece. It's like these two things going on at the same time. It's like I'm resisting it, and yet I'm stuck in this space. And then, but then it's got more possibilities, but it doesn't because of, you know. And I just found that so fascinating and so fun to work out, almost like a problem, like how to work out, draw enough, but don't draw too much.
I love that you brought up the apartment, the windows part of graphic recording, because that was actually my favorite part of the graphic recording itself. When you were drawing like the windows, the boxes of windows on the
or panels,
and you began to like shade around it, I think. And then that's when Amanda's voice came into the piece. And Amanda, you were talking about I wrote it down, distance within the distances that displaced bodies experience. And I love that part of the recording.
I love that part slows down to the imagery slows way down. And then Amanda's exploring this idea, and all of a sudden you're pausing because you're like, oh, she's saying one more thing. And then like a tiny thing happens. Okay. And then there's like this shades in and this shades in. And I really love how it worked out.
Was that intentional? Because that was my favorite part. I love that you brought up the pause, because that's what I felt like, that slowing down and like sort of letting the piece breathe. But it was also such a impactful part of the piece, and really, you know, was just able to capture that feeling of alienation that I see when I read Amanda's work. I love that.
It was intentional, and it was also lucky the way that it lined up, because when I drew it, I was intending for that to happen at that same moment. But when I time lapsed my original drawings, it just it dropped several frames. When I would be drawing slower, it would just kind of drop. It's just a function of this app that I was drawing inside. So when we edited it, there was less information and it slowed down for that one part because I wanted the pacing to stretch out to match what Amanda was doing. And then in the end, it was sort of like both. Like it happened, and then I was like, okay, that works. I was going for this, and then this version of that happened, and it was actually lucky, to be honest, because I had filled in a lot more shading live. Like when I was drawing, I did more shading around the windows. I did more line work. I was deliberately pacing different things. But then when it happened, when I got it back from the editor and he managed to slow that part down, it was like there was less information of drawing, which I actually was really happy about. And it was still abstract drawing. It was still shading, like you're saying, but it wasn't, there was more of it. And I am glad that it's more sparse there.
Yeah, it was such a good part. And this is sort of where I want to ask if you had, I mean, Amanda, did you have a personal, I was going to ask if you had a favorite part of the graphic recording, but I think it's better if I asked, did the graphic, I know you spoke about this earlier, but how did the graphic recording sort of add to your piece, do you think?
I think it adds a whole new layer of meaning and subjectivity, like you were both saying, like about your favorite part and just slowing down that pace, and how that kind of like allows you time to reflect. And and I think visual, animated, it's a multisensory kind of knowledge that sometimes the written and audio version of the work can be too literal, and sometimes it doesn't allow you to reach a more effective and embodied level of interpreting a piece. And I think by doing that, we allow that information to be more accessible to different people, because everyone absorbs information through different mediums, and some mediums may affect us at different levels. This is very personal, and it varies depending on the person. So the medium that speaks to me might not be the same medium that speaks to another person. So having different ways of experiencing a work and a piece, I think it just adds more possibilities as ways of knowing.
Yeah, like the graphic recording is already in itself a different translation of your work. That makes me wonder about whether, so I'm going to bring it back to COVID again. But Amanda, your piece was already speaking about your experience as how you existed as a migrant woman during COVID, right? And the collaboration was during COVID, but that's where I sort of wanted to turn the question to you, Devon, because you are responsible for translating Amanda's work, and the fact that I guess you too were living or experiencing the era of COVID. Was that some point of was that a point of connection, maybe? Yeah, like how did you connect to Amanda's work? Because I feel like inherently there's already a part of you in the graphic recording, right?
There has to be, like I'm kind of a filter, right? But you're right, that's interesting about living through the same pandemic in different, like as different stuff, like we have different subjectivity and different experiences. And my experience with isolation, for example, logistically, I'm so envious of Amanda's experience being lonely and isolated, because I'm like,
I bet
I have none of that time. It's very involved and full on. And I'm actually quite introverted, so I find it exhausting. But anyways, I couldn't help but resonate with Amanda's words, just trying to describe that weird kind of like prolonged uncertainty, isolation, exploring different things of like what you knew to be familiar through this whole other lens of pandemic and stay-at-home orders and that sort of thing, and not traveling. But I also was very aware that I didn't want to over interpret, and I didn't want to overstep and take up space for my own experience, because that was kind of like precisely what I was trying to not overdo. You know what I mean? I wanted to give that space for Amanda, and I think that's why the pace of it in the planning and drawing went nicely. Like it was a nice feedback loop. And that as I had the spontaneity of hearing Amanda's point of view and what she was looking for, and what those, textures and shading and shapes, I was literally transiting right into the piece in those days, which is why it was fast. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. I'm very aware of like our experiences being different in the pandemic for sure.
I can say that seeing your interpretation of the work, for me, it's almost like you could actually feel in a very empathetic way whatever I was trying to convey and feel. And this was
Good.
really neat. 'Cause yeah, like if I had to draw something like the way I was feeling, maybe it would be in a very similar way as you
Yeah.
did it. So you got the message and you were able to translate it in a very empathetic way, even though we were coming from different places of personal experiences. So this was a really, really amazing process, you know, just seeing that you were actually able to convey those ideas and those feelings into, you know, like something that is beautiful, it has movement, and you know, like it might speak to other people much better than, you know, just my text or the audio.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Like that's what I'm always trying to do when I'm doing graphic recording, is just like let things go through me, you know, like take what's there, what's happening, and synthesize it and put it with as little, I'm aware of my subjectivity, but like as little of it as I possibly can, just to empathize with information that's trying to be shared. So I'm really glad you felt like that, because I also felt like that. Like I felt like your text was so empathetic and was so amazing to jump into, and like is even your voice is so it's almost like vulnerable and intimate the way the recording is, and I think that's a testament to the piece, but how you read it. So each layer of it is really interesting to me. Like just your text is interesting, just your black and white photograph is interesting, just the audio, and then you add in the graphic recording, and there are all these pieces that are doing a different thing, but ultimately the core is the same, you know?
I really like that you both brought up the subject of empathy. And one of the questions I feel like when people think of research, they don't think of empathy. One of the questions I wanted to ask of both of you was about research creation. So do you find that this work is a form of research creation? Do you think that the graphic recording process not only translates the original piece into a different form, but makes new meaning out of the autoethnographic experience that Amanda, you provided in the first place? And I was wondering if you could both talk about empathy in that research creation.
For me, this work would fall into research creation because it's a form of creative writing, photography, audio, and it's informed by my academic studies and my embodied reflexivity going through COVID. And so I'm juxtaposing a global pandemic event with my personal embodied affective experience from intersectional positionality standpoint. And second, it is a collaborative work involving Devon, involving Lauren, Angela, everyone that enabled this work to happen. So we have different people, different perspectives, different mediums, graphic recording, photo, text, audio. And I have a quote here from an ethnographer, Dwight Conquergood, and he says that ethnography is an embodied practice, and it's an intensely sensuous way of knowing. The embodied researcher is the instrument, unquote. So I do believe that's exactly what this work is doing. It started as an experimental autoethnography And then it evolved into this creative, collaborative research creation with Devon.
Mm. And I would add that the archive of the, the transcripts of our emails and the Dropbox folder and the, Angela chiming in and Lauren chiming in and people kind of responding and reacting. And I feel like that whole kind of pile of things is its own, it has its own life as well. It's its own kind of research creation, like an emerging something. There's something to it there. There's such substance to those uncoverings that we were doing together that kind of informed the final piece in a lot of ways. Like, oh, they made this decision, they didn't make that decision. Oh, they, these are the reference photos that Amanda shared. And then this is like, the original audio. And I don't know, I just think that, I think you know what I'm trying to say, but it's I find it fascinating, the whole correspondence and collaboration.
I love that you mentioned that behind the scenes work that happens to create this piece. Of course it's really between you and Amanda, but I know Lauren isn't on the recording right now, but just the fact that Lauren had to schedule it and we had to do meetings, and is that something that you sort of had to is that something you were trying to bring up, like the behind the scenes?
Yeah, and just think of all the kind of the labor and the empathy and like weighing in with different perspectives that was happening at every stage. It does inform the final that we did get to. And then I would argue that people coming to that piece now, they're going to have their interpretation. It like kind of fractures off again, and I just find that really interesting if you like zoom out and you consider not a line of here's the final piece, here's Amanda's one thing, and then here's the collaboration. It's like it's almost like a web of intersections, and it's almost like you want to put it in a box. We're not going to do that. Like I almost want to collect it and archive it and label it, because it's like that. It exists as this interesting pile of stuff.
Yeah, it's super seamless. Yeah, I feel like it's everything. It's not like, oh, I did this and you did that.
Exactly.
It's just like everyone was collaborating
completely,
behind the scenes or not, and then we allowed the process to happen. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen, and I think this is very important for research creation. You start with something, but you allow the process to uncover things that you were not expecting. And I think this is where the magic really happens, and it's when you collaborate with other people, because then it's so much richer, because the possibilities are endless. And like you said, someone is going to see that work and they're going to have their own interpretation, and it's going to be a living work forever. And that's the beauty of it.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you were able to articulate like we didn't know where we were going. Like that's maybe exactly why it's research creation,
And I think too, the fact that, socially, just as a researcher yourself living during COVID, you already don't know what's happening, but the fact that you both are willing to still find a way to create, make research, do research at a time of uncertainty, willing to make research flexible. I think that is the magic, is what you said, Amanda. And also just the willingness to collaborate with each other still is what is something beautiful, is what's so beautiful about the piece as well. But we're almost closing in to the end of the interview. So I want to ask if there was anything the both of you wanted to say about the graphic recording. Any last words? Anything else to add?
I just wanted to say that I didn't even know that I was gonna submit anything for, you know, like the COVID-19 and cultural studies series in the first place. And I only did that because Angela encouraged me to do so. So it was funny because it took me a while to show the work, like to my colleagues, family, friends, because it was so personal and so vulnerable, like you said, Devon.
Mhm.
And I felt like very self-conscious of the work, mainly because it's very metaphorical and I'm not sure how people were gonna interpret this work. And like seeing the graphic recording, it kind of like made me surpass that self-conscious zone and share the work with everyone. And after I done that, I received a lot of positive feedback, and it was kind of a cure, because the feelings that I approach in my text, they kind of like slowly started to dissipate. So it was a really, really nice experience personally. And like acknowledging my positionality, my intersectionality within the pandemic also allowed me to better understand how COVID was affecting us in a wider like societal sense, and how to better navigate and cope with it. So yeah, like I feel like it made everything more tangible, and I thought people would engage more with a graphic recording rather than just text and audio. So it's almost like I completed like this kind of like experience
That's
and
awesome.
immersion. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, people were reaching out to me as well. I think I shared it on my Facebook, and a lot of people in my circle were reaching out and just being like, wow, that really articulated this experience so beautifully, and like it really resonated with a lot of people. And yeah, it was, and I think the combination was just it made it more accessible. People felt like they could click on it and see something. Yeah, so people were really responding to it over here too.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I mean, your I mean, even before the graphic piece, your written piece was already such a solid piece, something that I actually personally very much resonated with. So thank you so much for sharing it, because it's so important to be able to, you know, connect to. I mean, I'm also another like immigrant, racialized woman in Canada right now. So it was very personal for me to even hear it, but also just looking at the graphic recording and, you know, how much it added to the written and audio piece was, it was just really, it was really good. So I'm so thankful that the both of you came out here to talk about it. And also thank you for sharing. And Lauren, did you want to add anything? I don't know if you can. No? Okay. But thank you both so much.
Thank you both. That means a lot to me. This work it's gonna live in my heart forever. Yeah, it's very precious to me.